Hello everyone, welcome back to AOCPMR Podcast. My name is Loc Lam. I'm a fourth year medical student and a AOCPMR Populations Co-Chair. I will be the host for the podcast today, and with me here is Dr. Aslan Tariq. And welcome to our podcast, Dr. Tariq.
Hey, good to be here.
It's my pleasure to host you today for the podcast, and thank you so much for being here. Yeah, and before we go ahead with some questions, I just want to do a little bit introduction about yourself to the audience. Is that okay, Dr. Tariq?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so Dr. Aslan Tariq is a board-certified physical medicine and rehabilitation physician and a chief clinical officer of the Integrated Rehab Consultants. He earned his undergraduate degree from Stony Brook University and received a medical degree from the Lake Erie College of Orthopedic Medicines. He completed his physical medicine rehabilitation residency at Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital. He went on to complete additional fellowship training in pain and musculoskeletal medicine at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Tariq currently provides PM&R service to various post-acute facilities in Chicago area. Dr. Tariq is also a medical seminar. He also the owner and founder of Optimal Health Medical Fitness and Illinois Institute of Regenerative Medicines. His outpatient practice are dedicated to provide most advanced non-surgical orthopedic and regenerative medicines in the Chicago area. Are these information correctly describing you, Dr. Tariq?
It does. You missed a few things here, but I'll talk about it more later.
Okay, all right. And so we can just go ahead with some questions. How did you learn about PM&R, and can you tell us about your journey in matching into this specialty?
Sure. Well, thanks. First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. And, it was a pleasure having you as one of my students. And obviously, we met outside as well. So, keeping social distancing, but it was nice to see you. And I'm glad, you're doing this podcast, but I feel like it's a value for the students to get to hear different perspectives, because once you go into training, sometimes you kind of are in a bubble or a cocoon and you might not really hear what other people have to say. The field itself is very broad, and hopefully I'll give some perspective about that. So back to my background. So I grew up in Pakistan. I moved when I was 18 to the US. My parents still live there actually. And when I came to the US, I initially wanted to go back. That was my intent because my family ran a business and I really had no intention of doing medicine and staying here. If I wanted to do medicine, I could have stayed back there. It would be a lot shorter. It's only 5 years of medical school there. But regardless, I came and I initially signed up for a degree in business with also a degree in anthropology. But I happened to find a job as one of those like billboards, or not billboards, those like, signs that you have for jobs, for summer jobs. And it was a job to work in a nursing home as an aide. And it kind of intrigued me. I really was interested in, knowing more about it. I felt like it was something that was just interesting and really didn't think that was going to lead on to different things. But ended up applying, and I absolutely loved it. The patients, really gave me a lot of good positive feedback. They said, you have a great demeanor, and if you're good in science, you should be a physician, and kind of go forward and kind of go from there. I also ended up spending some time with a physician who was seeing patients in that setting, who happened to be a physiatrist. And at that point, I had no idea what I wanted to do and what the field of physiatry was. But it was interesting that I got exposed to that early on, and now I'm that attending working in that setting and I have students under me. But I also got another job in the summer working as a brain injury counselor. Basically, what it was that there are brain injury patients that go back to the community and they cannot be 100% independent. So they have people helping them. And it was called the Long Island Brain Injury Institute. It was really cool experience to kind of spend time with them, really understand their disabilities, and try to make them as productive of a part of society as possible. So like taking out shopping, going to the movie theater. So it's really cool. Like got to make some lifelong friends there and really understood like disability. So I started, connecting towards medicine at that point. Really didn't know about physiatry at that point too much. In my third year rotation, in one of my internal medicine rotation, one of the interns was a physiatrist, future physiatrist, because he's an intern at that point. He told me about PM&R. It really intrigued me. Going back, osteopathic medicine, I felt like it was a good fit for me, because I've always been told from my grandma and my uncle and aunt that whenever they had some aches and pains, I would come in and massage them. And they said I had magic in my hands, but I don't know if that is true. But regardless, I felt like it was really good with my hands, and I love the MSK system. So osteopathic medicine was a good fit for me. I could have gone either way because I got into MD and DO school, but I decided to go the osteopathic way. Then the next natural progression for me was going to be PM&R. And then I solidified my my decision about that based on my experience in the rotations. I did a bunch of rotations, mostly in Chicago, at all the main hospitals here, pretty much all the main ones here. And every rotation, my love for the residency and the specialty grew. I ended up finding some phenomenal mentors. That's the key for all this, is finding people you can look up to, and hopefully they're, especially physiatrists being so nice. I've barely ever met a physiatrist who's mean or doesn't want to help out. So they're very approachable. Don't ever think someone's not approachable. Always to reach out to them. So I had the same thing. I had multiple mentors who helped me out, and I feel like having gone through the whole process and finished medical school in 2008, 12 years later, I feel very fortunate to have found an amazing specialty.
That's an awesome story you have there, and I'm very glad you shared with us today about your journey and how to match into PM&R. Very glad about that. And what are some memorable experience that you have as a current physiatrist, even as a past resident or fellow, that make you glad that you choose PM&R as a specialty?
I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint to one specific person or one specific day. Honestly, I'm very, very blessed to be able to do this every day. You were in my rotation, so the relationship that I have with my patients. They're part of my family. They treat me like family. They treat my son as their grandson. Many patients would come bringing gifts and vegetables from the garden or things like that. I mean, I never asked for it, but they feel like they want to, because I've helped them achieve something that they thought they couldn't achieve. For example, walking without a cane, or being able to avoid a surgery, or losing weight, or things like that, just to make them feel normal. Because sometimes they lose that drive, or they don't have anybody helping them out. So I keep telling my patients, and that's something that I tell my students to also tell the patients, that the goal of a physiatrist is to add life into your years, not necessarily years into your life. So if I'm going to make you a more active and functional person, that's my goal. And I'm going to find different things in which I can actually make that happen. If that means injections, that means therapy, that means nutrition, that means fitness, and whatever that is, or maybe it's medicine, whatever that is, if I can make you a more functional person. So on a daily basis, I have many memorable patients. It's hard to kind of pinpoint to one person.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And as back to the fact that you are private, that's why you private business owner. That's why you heard that owner experience. And running a business is something that we never learn in medical school, or probably even in residency. So in this podcast, I just want to explore more about this topic. Can you tell us why you decide to run your own private practice business straight out of residency or fellowship, and what your experience like to doing that?
So I think partially it comes from my parents, because my parents still run a business in Pakistan. They actually run a school, and I grew up around that environment of being an entrepreneur and starting your own thing and being your own boss. So I felt like it was more natural for me, even though it is definitely risky. Obviously, anybody would tell you that starting your own practice or starting a business is risky, and it's even more risky nowadays because less and less physicians are coming out of training to start your own practice. I think physiatry can still do it. Certain specialties, it's really difficult to even set up your own practice. Obviously, certain things like ER, anesthesiology, things like that are more difficult, or hospitalists, obviously. But that said, I feel like I was more open to it, and I had the business degree in undergrad, and I felt like even though I work really well with people, obviously I've had many people who are above me and bosses and things like that, but I'm a good follower, but I felt like I'm a better leader. So I ended up deciding to make that jump, and it was something that some people were basically telling me, even some of my mentors were saying that it's risky, like going out and do your own thing, and some actually recommended against it. They said just have a paycheck and have a job. But with the kind of personality I have, more risk, more reward. That's exactly how I feel majority of the time, and I took the risk, and I'm glad I made the risk. At the same time, the challenges way above and beyond what I can talk about in a few minutes here. But as a business owner, you have to really do it all. So I have to know what SEO is, which is called search engine optimization. I have to know social media. I have to know how to design a website. I mean, do I have to do it myself? No, not necessarily, but I have to know enough about it. Otherwise, people will come in, they basically will charge me, crazy amounts when I know this is what the real value of that thing is. Then you have to, basically be the person responsible for plumbing and electricity and insurance and attorneys, and there's so many different layers of that. Obviously, in a hospital setting, you have many people helping you out, but in this setting, as a business owner, you have to do it all. So my hours could be any time of the day. I mean, the time from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. I have to think about it. That doesn't mean that that's what I have to constantly do, but it just is something I have to, basically keep an eye on, at all times.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Tariq. That's very helpful from your point of view. And can you tell us about your typical day of the week as a private clinicians?
Sure. With me, because I do many things now, and you've kind of mentioned a few things. So just to kind of give a quick summary, I do clinic 1 day a week, which you guys, were spending time with me. The other 3 days of, usually 4 days, depending on the week, I round in the subacute setting, which is basically a rehab setting after you're in the hospital. These are nursing homes that historically were not really rehab places, but now they've become rehab places. We have a lot of patients who have the same type of conditions to go to. On top of that, I mix it in with running the business, the chief clinical officer of the largest group in the country. I also do some medical legal work, and just to kind of tell you what that is, basically like people who have injuries, and you have attorneys that want a specific feedback or information about what the condition is about, or what the cost would be and what kind of surgery someone might need. I assist with that as well. So I have to kind of do it all, and it's all like sometimes it's all mixed in the same day, sometimes it's separated, but I like it that way. It kind of keeps it interesting. I don't do the exact same thing every day. I'm always just on the go and doing things. That's my personality, and I've done it for almost 10 years now, and I really don't have any intention of slowing down yet.
Yeah, definitely. Even like when I was rotating with you, and whenever you try to teach us, I saw you in the car, keep moving around and keep very busy. So yeah, and your practice at Optimal Health Medical Fitness is such an awesome medical facility that have almost everything that you need for like an MSK or like a sport clinic. I'm really a big fan of it because it's something that I kind of want to do in the future as well. And so can you tell us more about this facility that you have, and how did you come up with this business model, and what are some challenges that you face as running this business?
Sure. I think if I think about it, as an osteopath, you always think about prevention. You always think about, if you really go to the core of an osteopathic physician, you're talking about preventative medicine, you're talking about weight, fitness, and function. Those are the kind of things that we always think about. So one of the issues that I had as an attending right off the bat, and even before that, was if I had a patient with knee pain and they came in to see me for knee pain, and I tell them, hey, well, you should go join a gym, and there's a list of exercises I want you to do for your knee pain, or maybe go see a physical therapist. But if I know the underlying issues, they're overweight, or they're not eating right, or they're not active, there's only only so much I can do in that quick meeting, and I felt like the compliance is very low. So if I told someone to go join a gym, they would join a gym, and then invariably they would get hurt, or they just didn't want to go, and they would just not tell me about that, or not show up because if they have fear of basically acknowledging the fact that they failed in a way, even though I don't think that's a failure at all. But that said, I didn't really have any control over who I send the patient to for training, fitness, and personal training and nutrition. I had some people that I knew, and they helped me, but I wanted to combine the physiatry side of things and the fitness side of things into one, and that's where the medical fitness idea came about. Once I got the idea, I realized it's not a unique idea that I came up with, that other people across the country were doing it, but I had no clue that people were thinking that way. There's a big, amazing corporation out in Minnesota called Rehab Medical that really helped me out. They were my mentors. They helped me set everything up, and I basically had the marriage of the training and the physiatry side of the PM&R. First, at that point, they are going to see a trainer, get a functional assessment. If they need therapy, they'll get therapy. Start losing the weight. They don't get unless they have severe pain, they don't get the injection right off the bat. I want them to see if exercise will improve that, because we know arthritis, it improves by movement. So motion is motion. So, that's a relationship I get with them, and I have control over my trainers. In the same facility, you have a chiropractor, a functional medicine doctor, because sometimes weight loss is not about eating right. It could be your thyroid, it could be your hormones. So I mean, even though I can learn all these things, but I know that I need experts who can help me, and under the same roof, if someone comes in, we can try to provide them all the resources they can. In my practice and all the years I've done this, and I've seen hundreds of patients, I think approximately 95% of patients that I see do not need surgery. It's probably 98%. Obviously, it's not a fracture or ACL tear kind of patient. Sometimes they do need the surgery, but a lot of times I can do regenerative medicine and rehab and diet and other modifications and help them achieve the goals they want to achieve. So that's where the idea came about. I think if there's any negatives about it is basically, again, any negatives that could come along with being a private practitioner or independent business owner. That's something that you have no one has control over. Reimbursement, hospital systems, being involved. There's so many different variables, and it's hard to kind of get into it in a lot of detail. But I'm glad that the setup that I have, I'm able to provide for the patients what I would provide for myself, and that was my goal. And I don't prescribe any narcotics in my clinic, which is really nice because I have patients who are highly motivated and they don't want to be addicted to medicine.
Wow, thank you for explaining that more to us. Very interesting, and definitely like something I'm looking for in the future as well. And so currently you are also a Chief Clinical Officer for the Integrated Rehab Consultants. Can you tell us a little bit more about this position that you serve right now? And what are some of your duty as a CCO, and what are some challenges that you face, and how did you overcome it?
So I'll try to summarize that in a few minutes. So, as we know that physiatrists work in different settings, you'll hear this term again and again. It's called the continuum of care. The continuum of care basically means seeing the patient, manage the patient and their outcomes throughout their continuum. The time they get to the hospital, the time they're even home. So the whole process. So historically, physiatrists have worked in acute rehab setting and outpatient setting. If someone has a stroke, they get acute rehab, they get better. Then depending on how much better they are and their insurance and things like that, they might go home, or they might not be able to go home at that point. They might need some more rehab before going home. So interestingly, 6 times more rehab happens in the subacute setting, which is nursing home with rehab, than acute rehab. Historically, physiatrists have not been involved there. We basically would see the patient in acute rehab, say, we'll see you later, and the patient might come back in the clinic. So how do you really control someone's all these values and all these different basically outcomes without doing that? So that's where actually in residency we had a subacute unit in our hospital. We would actually manage patients there. We did in-house moonlighting. We got exposed to that, significant exposure to that in residency. In fellowship, I ended up doing some moonlighting, doing subacute rehab. My former chief resident, basically he started a new practice in 2010. And in 12 or so, I was a third physician who joined the company. And after that, it's exploded. So we have 150 physicians now across the country. We're in 30 states. Vast majority of us, actually, almost all the physicians are actually independent contractors. What IRC does basically helps set up their practice. We all work in this post-acute or subacute setting. Managing patients' outcomes, seeing patients in rehab, helping the same patients you see in the acute rehab setting. You saw everybody. You saw spinal cord patients, stroke, orthopedic fractures, neurological conditions, things like ALS and Parkinson's, and everything in between. So we are the consulting physicians there versus the acute rehab or the primary care physicians. So we have a co-management model, which I manage the rehab side of things, the pain, MSK, neuro, rehab, and the primary care managers what they're really good at: internal medicine, diabetes, hypertension, CHF, COPD. So we work together as a team, the therapist, me, the primary care, the orthopedic surgeons, depending on what kind of condition someone has, to optimize care, to reduce the length of stay, to reduce the hospitalization rate, to reduce the cost of healthcare. And the physiatrists the best at creating value because we're not expensive. We're not surgeons. We don't we don't order a lot of expensive tests and some medications, and we try to improve the function of patient and reduce their falls and things like that. So that said, that's what the company does. As Chief Clinical Officer, I am helping create protocols, doing all the educations, doing a lot of outreach, speaking at the AOCPMR conference this year, 2 talks. Normally every year I give a talk as well. At the same time, guiding all the physicians we have, the practitioners we have in what the proper way or the right way to help these patients out would be. So, in a nutshell, that's it's obviously a lot more on top of that, but that's usually in a nutshell. The challenges are, like it's constant. I have to kind of mix in again other stuff that I do with that. You have to troubleshoot. You have to kind of find answers quickly. With COVID, it was a tricky time, obviously. So we have to kind of find different ideas, pivot to telemedicine, and initially when I approach, obviously on Twitter, when you approached me as well, and I had quite a few students who approached me. At that point, I wasn't super busy, because things had slowed down, and I was doing telemedicine, which is in a way is more efficient than being in person. And then within a couple of months, it went back to normal. And then I felt like, I really couldn't do any virtual rotation anymore. But I still have students now. I have students in my clinic now, but I still prefer in person.
Yeah, that's a great business that you're working with the IRC, definitely. And I'm looking forward to your talk at the AAPMR conference, because I'm also kind of attend there. So even though it's virtual, but hopefully I can have a chance to see your talk over there. And I'm very glad that you make that virtual rotation actually, and very helpful, especially for repaying me for PM&R. And what are your goals in the future as a private clinical practice owner, especially in the field of PM&R?
I think my goal is to keep on providing the care that I'm providing. I feel like my patients have given me feedback over the years of, why they prefer to see me before they see an orthopedic surgeon, for example, for an opinion. People come to see me for the first opinion. They, now, because I've done this for long enough, most private practice physicians will say that. So I've seen like the whole family, I've seen, for example, I initially might have seen the mom, and then she told her husband, and then the kids came. And so I've seen the whole family for different conditions. People are extremely active, or people have autoimmune disorders, or people are older or younger. So in my clinic, I have my youngest patient, and it was 8 years old. My oldest is 98 years old. So I can see the full gamut of patients. So my goal, my own personal goal, is to keep improving my knowledge. I am, that's one of the reasons that I have students with me, and a lot of private practice doctors don't have students with me, is that it motivates me to learn more. And you guys get presentations, and we get some journal clubs, you watch some videos, that kind of stuff. It keeps motivating me to improve, because I'm not satisfied yet with the amount of knowledge that I have. There's so much more to learn, and I'm learning more about other things that I never realized would be important. So hopefully, one thing that your listeners can look into is the connection between nutrition and function. That's one of the things that is missing. Even in osteopathic school, I barely got enough education on nutrition. Definitely in residency, there's barely any of that. But there is a strong connection with what you eat and how you feel. If associated with pain, improvement in function, maximizing your capability, there's a strong connection with that. So learning that's the journey that I'm going through right now, and learning more about that. But in a nutshell, I'm constantly learning. Like, you can't see it too well here, but like all the books here on the side, these are all like PM&R books that I have. And I'm still reading them, I'm still watching videos, I'm still going to conferences. So I never want to stop learning.
Okay, yeah. I see. Yeah, there's a lot of book behind you. Yeah.
The books
And as for the field PM&R, what is your view or understanding on the future of field as a whole?
I think the future is very bright for it. At the same time, one of the issues that I am working with in the AAPMR conference, or not the conference, the organization, we have a committee called the Brand Expansion Committee. And now, what does that really mean in a nutshell? It's like expanding the brand of physiatry. And physiatry has a significant branding issue. Like, people don't know what we do, and residents and medical students never get exposed to it. The number of times I've heard from even fourth-year medical residents saying, "Oh, I've never got exposed to PM&R." So I think branding is a big issue. People don't know what physiatry means. They don't understand what we do. But once they understand what we do, there's a significant amount of value, obviously. I think the future is bright for us, because obviously the population is getting older. Medicare insurance companies, that kind of the payers, we call them, they're focusing on quality of care and value-based medicine. It basically means that you're not doing the most expensive thing. We know historically that if a patient has back pain and they see a physiatrist, it'd be less costly for the system than they go see an orthopedic surgeon. You're going to probably prevent a lot of surgeries. You're going to reduce the hospitalization rate. There's different tools that we have. We're always trying to improve quality of life. So usually we're not doing expensive things. So in the era of the value-based medicine, the future is very bright for us. Now, that's just one part of it. Sports medicine, people are more active than ever before. There are more runners and marathons. The population is getting older. You have a lot more. There's a regenerative medicine is a huge field that we haven't even touched yet. There's new technology, ultrasound, other stuff like that. There's so much out there that I think we need more physiatrists. That's one thing for sure. As a population, we have a huge bulk of patients going to be older soon. The baby boomers and after that. So, in a nutshell, the future of physiatry is phenomenal. I have no issues, I think, there.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that from you, like, or the future of PM&R as a whole. And what are some common myths about PM&R that you want to clear up now? And since you're already like attending and running your own private practice?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really experienced it so much, but I've heard people say that they get confused between a physiatrist and a therapist, physical therapist. It's very common. I'm not saying I haven't heard that from other people, but it's easy for me, confuse that. People might associate that with a specific thing. For example, they might say, "Oh, well, physiatrists only do pain management." At the same time, other people might think that we're not very valuable. We're not a surgeon, for example, and we're just doing stuff that might not create value. But that's not true. There's enough evidence, there's enough studies, and enough data to show that we are valuable. Those are probably the most important thing. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, definitely about that. And some people might like come and like make a mistake like, oh, you're a physical therapist now, they don't know much about it. It's come with the branding wise as well, as you said earlier. I know that you are not like associated with any like academic institution right now at the moment, but in this pandemic time and in this pandemic time in the era cycle, per your current knowledge and your connection with other physiatrists around the country, what are your view on how the program would choose an applicant for this year?
I think because a lot of times obviously you haven't been able to do the rotations at the program you wanted to pick. I mean, I was very fortunate that I was able to do the rotations in the majority of places in Chicago. It's going to be based on your application, obviously, and your letter of recommendations, whatever you have. If I was if I was a program director, it'd be a tough choice because you really don't know how passionate someone is because their rotation got canceled or they don't have a letter. That's why I think more there's going to be more, I think, weight onto your scores possibly, which I don't think is the right approach because that doesn't tell you what kind of physiatrist will be. Obviously there's some kind of baseline score, but it really shouldn't just be based on scores. Maybe the personal statement and your history of why you like physiatry and what led you to that point, probably more weighted versus other stuff. It's going to be very tough. I think they might actually end up having to do a lot more interviews to get to know people because the ARS application might not tell you enough, especially because now the interviews majority, I'm sure they're going to be Zoom and or whatever video. They might be able to squeeze in more interviews. So it's going to be an interesting cycle. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I can see that as well. Very very weird time we live in right now. And when I did my rotation with you, I had an awesome time with learning about PM&R. And I have a mock interview with you to prepare for the ERA cycle as well. And I'm very glad that I did that with you. What are some of your advice on the fourth year medical students in this interview seasons?
One advice would be to the setup, right? So, making sure you have the proper setup, the proper lighting, the proper, camera, the audio, and those like simple stuff. Unfortunately, you don't have control over everything. The internet, maybe make sure you have a landline connected, not Wi-Fi. I mean, this is basic stuff, but you got to make sure you get all that stuff ready. Practice. You want to make sure you sound professional. You're not doing anything that's fidgety or just not looking professional. Those kind of things. Obviously, you can practice a lot. Record yourself, hear yourself out, ask other people for advice about how you sound. There are obviously certain questions that'll be asked, and I don't know if you want to ask me later on or not, but certain things will be asked consistently. I think I was asked that every single interview that I had, and I think interviewed at 15 places, was why PM&R, and everything on your ARS application could be a question. So making sure you understand everything written down and you're able to answer any questions related to that. And then, it's tough because, when I was applying for residency, you got to spend time with the residents the night before. You hang out at a social gathering, and you get to kind of see the vibe of the people, and they get to see your body language and things like that might not be that approachable on a video call. But you want to still do your best and be confident and passionate about the field, and at the same time, don't come off as being too arrogant. I think most physiatrists don't like people who are arrogant. Just come off as like your love and passion for the field and people you want to take care of it. As long as that comes through, I think that's the best you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. But yeah, that's, like you said about some question interview that they might ask you the common one, and I'd also like want to know about like what are some questions that they think that our students should ask the program so that we can learn more about them.
Yeah, other questions. I'll go back to that last was like other questions they might ask. Obviously one is going to be, why PM&R? They might sometimes. I mean, again, it's hard to kind of predict what programs will ask. Every program has their own, thing, and but there's certain things that will usually be asked again and again. It might be a memorable patient, a specific thing about a condition you saw, and you got to have a story of why you want to do PM&R down. Obviously, they might even ask you what you think you might do afterwards. And if you don't know, you don't know. You just want to be honest about it. As far as like the questions you want to ask them, again, it really depends on the program. Every program is different. They might have a specific research program, or they might have a fellowship they have, or they might have a specific attending you want to work with. But I think, especially in the world right now, asking them if they have a specific policy about integration, engaging, and because that's a big part of like what we deal with, especially like people like you and me, we're immigrants, and as long as the programs that I interviewed at, vast majority of them I felt really welcome. One of the things that I want to bring up actually is like when you're applying for residency and interviewing stuff, is deciding on what kind of program do you want as in size, because that was one of the things that I thought about a lot. Because you can have I had programs I interviewed at that had 20 residents, 15 residents, or 10 residents. It was pretty big programs, and some that had only 2. And I knew that I wanted somewhere in the middle, because if you only have 2 residents and let's say you don't get along with that co-resident, then you have a tough 3 years ahead of you. Or if you have 12 residents and you kind of get lost in the mix, I wanted that middle ground of like 5 or 6 residents in which I could get to at least, thankfully I got along with everybody, but you can at least have that camaraderie and not just be very small. So asking about their extra out of work activities, like do they have group activities? That tells you a lot about the environment they have. Some residents will travel to conferences together. Some will actually do sports events together. If you're interested in sports coverage, for example, ask them how much of that do they do, and is that required, or is there an opportunity for that? If you're interested in research, what do they do? It really depends on what you're interested in doing and asking questions based on that. And I think really it boils down to, and it's tough because you're doing a virtual interview, like what kind of environment they have. Is it a nurturing environment? Is it more on your own and you ask for questions? I prefer the nurturing environment initially, because you're new at this. You need to help you out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for those questions that you told us to ask the program, and I think that's gonna be very helpful when it comes to like ERAS. I mean, like come to the interview cycle. Yeah.
I'm gonna answer one more thing. Actually, I'm gonna add one thing because I'm sure no one else talked about this. Do not focus on call. Do not focus on like, I didn't even think of that as like my category of like things I like and don't like about a program. Home call versus Q4 call versus Q6 call. It's best to take call. And you might be like, oh, well, you kind of want that cush lifestyle, and PM&R is like plenty of money, relaxation. This is the one time in your life where you can learn without other distractions. As a business owner, I have so many distractions and that kind of stuff. So it's okay. Everybody survives it. PM&R, with the new rules and everything, they're not going to overwork you. Don't focus on call. It's okay to have a tough intern year. You don't have to get the most cushy intern year. It's the one time in your life where you really are in there and learning it. And it goes by fast, like anything else that you have. 6 months in after COVID. Imagine that, like it's 6 months in now. So it goes by fast. try to get the tough intern year and try to, go to a program. It's okay if they have a lot of acute rehab. It's okay. I think I tell people to kind of calm down and don't just say, I want the cushest program. I understand why someone want that, but you're not going to maybe learn as much.
Yeah, definitely. I see. I know that you also did a fellowship after residency, and what your thought on doing fellowship versus like working in a general physician post residency?
Just a couple of points about that. Honestly, look at the program that you're in and decide on a fellowship once you're in the program. Don't decide like before the program. So, in my opinion, once you're in the program, because certain programs are so comprehensive that you really don't need to do an MSK fellowship or pain fellowship, because they will give you all that during residency, or ENG fellowship or brain injury fellowship. Honestly, the fellowship for the brain injury, spinal cord, peds, and again, people can have different opinions about that, but typically they're more for academic attendings or research-based attendings, because in private practice, no one's going to ask you if you have a brain injury fellowship when you're taking care of outpatient brain injury patients. Some hospitals might require, certain areas might require, geographic areas. If you're flexible about where you want to work, you could be rural or urban, doesn't matter. Then, you might not need a fellowship in the rural area. In the urban area, you definitely will need a fellowship. If you don't want to limit your options, do a fellowship. Certain fellowships will, obviously will teach you procedures like interventional pain, MSK, sports medicine. But I think that decision about the fellowship thing should be made 1 year in residency, and you start to see what you love to do. Because I went into PM&R thinking that I'm going to do brain injury, and halfway through I decided I want to do sports medicine. And then right at the end, I wanted to do a fellowship that had a mix of interventional and sports medicine. And I have friends of mine who did a fellowship in sports. They did a fellowship in interventional pain after I did 2 fellowships. Those are the kind of things that you'll decide once you get there and once you kind of start seeing the patient population, because you don't know what you like until you start doing it as a resident attending. So you might say, I love sports medicine. When you start seeing the patients, you're like, you know what? I don't know. I like a different patient population maybe. So I think it's beneficial to learn skills that you might have learned in residency. The skills you can take the rest of your life. It's best to do it right after residency, but it's definitely not a requirement.
Wow, that's a great advice from you, Dr. Tariq. And yeah, that's same thing as me. I want to come in just to have a very well open mindset, and I want to become a well-rounded physician as well. So just a little bit to learn more about yourself, and just a fun fact about you before we end with the podcast. So what are some hobbies that you love to do besides like medicine wise, besides like working at your clinic?
Sure. Well, recently my hobby's been taking care of my 3-year-old and hang out with him. And, he's 3.5, about 3.5, and I love it. It's a beautiful age. But, still, even though he's 3.5, we've taken him to 7, 8 countries, and we love traveling. I was born in Malaysia. I've gone to 55 countries, I think, and been all over the world. And I feel like it's something that I truly, truly love to do. And even though obviously right now is COVID, but I've gone to so many countries that I'm not really missing it. But I'm excited for the future when there's no COVID. I haven't gone to Vietnam yet. I would love to go. I've gone to Thailand and Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, all over that area. But one day, hopefully, we can go there.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, like after this COVID or have a chance in the future, me and you can travel to Vietnam. I can show you my hometown and everything about it as well.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. I love food from the Southeast Asia and that part of the world for sure. But also be interesting is that, maybe we can set up a mission, and maybe we can have other students come along with us. For example, I have access to everything you can imagine, obviously ultrasound machines and injections and steroid injections or Prolo or PRP, things like that. We can always go out there and try to help some, people out who have disability and have knee pain. And, there's a lot of people like that across the world, especially in third world countries that need our help. And I think there's one skill that we have that we can really use for sure in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I'm down for it. Definitely, like go help people travel at the same time. So perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
And I know that you are a very well-resourced person with a lot of like insight into the field of PR and the medicine in general. Where can our listener connect with you online to learn more about you as well as your other future project?
Sure. I'm guessing most people who listen to this might be on Twitter. Obviously, you can tweet me. DM me as well. Another thing, the advice that I have for you is, and I don't know if you've done this or not, but create a LinkedIn profile. It takes like 5-10 minutes to do. Make a professional profile. You'll be surprised at how many connections you can make that way. People are pretty approachable. And then, obviously over time, keep up with everything you're doing and add things in there and add people. And don't be afraid of adding anybody. It could be a chairman of department, doesn't matter. LinkedIn especially, like it's not like you have to be friends to be, connected. Otherwise, LinkedIn and Twitter are probably the two easiest way to do it. If anybody is in Chicago and depending on my schedule, I'll be happy to take them in as students. I always have students.
Okay, definitely. Thank you so much for that advice. I'm definitely gonna update it. I have a LinkedIn, but I haven't updated much, so I need to update that. And do you mind if I put your Twitter handle on this video so people can? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Dr.
Sure.
And I think that's all I have for you today on the podcast. I have a lot of fun doing this podcast with you, and I'm glad I can interview you for the podcast as well, since you also my preceptor, my first PM&R preceptor officially, virtual rotation. So I'm very glad to have you here, and thank you so much, Dr. Tariq, for doing this with me today.
Of course, man. Very proud of you, and hopefully the whole cycle goes well. And if you need to, let me know.
Thank you so much. You have a good night.